Hey listeners, it's Tim here. Just a quick note to invite you to join us live in Sydney for our in-person 2-day Top Music Live conference over the 15th and 16th of April 2026. I am so excited to finally be putting together another dynamic, inspirational, life-changing experience for music teachers after the success of our Piano Pivot Live conference in 2020. You'll enjoy thought-provoking keynotes, live teaching demonstrations, interactive workshops, fun, movement, roundtable masterminds, and our famous implementation sessions to make sure everyone gets the most from their investment. Early bird ticket pricing is now available and it includes all catering. Head over to topmusiclive.com for all the details. Prices increase really soon. I can't wait to see you there.
I think I just saw some of you cringe. I know that there are piano teachers out there who love performing and probably perform at every recital right alongside their students. But I dare say there are probably others who can't remember the last time they performed and highly prefer having their students perform rather than performing themselves. Hey there, I'm Rachel Ehring, and you're listening to the Top Music Piano Podcast. Get inspired as we discuss creative resources, trends in piano pedagogy, ways to grow your income and streamline your studio, and new ways to engage your students each week. If you are a teacher who wants to go beyond the method books to create an innovative studio that fosters lifelong music makers, you've come to the right place. Hey there, everyone. I hope that you are doing well today. There is a lot happening here at Top Music this year, and I am so happy to be a part of this team. You've probably heard about the live event happening in Sydney in a couple of months, and there's so much excitement and buzz about that from Tim and the team. And then if you listened to my podcast last week, you heard my episode 100 interview with my college piano teacher, who is so fantastic, and I'm so grateful to her for being on the show. If you missed that episode, be sure to go back and listen. But today it's just me here, and I'm going to share about some things that I've honestly kind of avoided talking much about because they are pretty personal and vulnerable, and that is performance anxiety. March's topic at Top Music is being stage ready, which is a nice way of saying dealing with your stage fright, or what we often call performance anxiety. So today I'm going to talk about some of my personal experiences with performance anxiety, and then I'll also give some tips for both you and your students that I've found helpful around this topic. If you've been around a while, you know that I spent many years as a collaborative pianist. And one of the things about being a collaborative pianist is that you perform a lot. There were times when I was a full-time staff pianist that I would play as many as 5 or 6 performances in a week, and they might all be different repertoire. Now, that wasn't every week, of course, but I was regularly performing multiple times per week. Some of them were pretty low pressure, like a studio class or maybe playing a few hymns for a chapel service. And then some of them were more intense, like accompanying a full senior recital or a choir concert, something like that. And then in between those performances, I had all the rehearsals, which were usually in front of people, such as at a choir rehearsal. So even though it wasn't actually a performance, there was still a room full of people who were going to hear me if I made a mistake. I tell you this because I think I've been the first to tell people about performing that the more you do it, the easier it gets, which is somewhat true. All of that performance experience has gotten me so much more comfortable with the nerves and also has helped me be able to play through the nerves and pivot quickly on stage when needed. One of the wild things about being an accompanist is that not only do you have to worry about your own mistakes on stage, but you are in a sense responsible for your partner's mistakes as well. So if you're accompanying a student and they skip a beat or a measure or maybe even a whole section of their piece, you have to notice it and jump to where they are and make it look seamless. I used to play this little game in my head where I would try to cover the students' mistakes so well that even their teacher sitting in the audience wouldn't notice that they had messed up the rhythm or skipped a part of their piece. But what I want to tell you is even with all of those hundreds, probably thousands of performances under my belt, I still get performance anxiety. Thankfully, it's not all the time, but sometimes it just comes out of nowhere for no explainable reason. Just recently, I was subbing at a church that I had never played at before, and I don't know if it was because I was in a new space with people who didn't know me and I thought I needed to prove myself, but I was playing the prelude and it was a song that I had played a number of times before. It was not difficult. And all of a sudden, I got this wave of performance anxiety and my fingers could not find the melody notes. It was probably only a split second, but it felt like I fumbled around for an eternity before finding my way back to the melody. And then, of course, because it was the prelude, that's all I could think about for the rest of the service. I think it was someone maybe on this podcast, and I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was that said it. They said to thank your first mistake. Actually, it might have been Sonia Poon. I'm not sure. None of us are perfect. So when that first mistake happens, say thank you and move on. I try to do that now, but there is that little voice in my head that says, but what if there's 15 more mistakes on their way? It seems like a lot of my performance anxiety comes from thinking I have to prove myself, especially in new situations. Anytime I start a new job or play in a new place, I think these people don't know me. If I mess up, that's their first impression that they will have of me as a pianist, and that's hard for me to get past. Once I'm more established in a job, I assume they will overlook a mistake here or there because they know that I'm generally reliable as a pianist. But at the beginning, yikes, it is hard to get out of that mindset. Here's another place that performance anxiety can rear its head. What if people actually are judging you? I like to tell my students for recitals and things like that no one is judging them. Everyone is cheering them on and is there to hear them share their music. But what about competitions? Or for me, it was when I was in grad school and my professors were giving me a grade and ultimately deciding my future as a pianist. I had so many nerves when I was in grad school at my recitals. I felt like Little Miss Butterfingers up there trying to play Brahms and Beethoven and just hoping and praying that my fingers knew what to do because my brain was definitely not helping the situation. It was all a scramble. And some of those recitals were a little rough. Obviously, I did survive. I did make it through grad school despite some very harsh words from one of my teachers, but that's a story for another time. But all of this commiserating with you and your nerves doesn't really help you. So let's get into some of the tactics that I've used to get through these performances when the performance anxiety is at its worst. Now, I want to acknowledge that yes, the goal is to enjoy performing, to share our music, to feel amazing on stage. But sometimes, at least for me, it is a matter of powering through when we aren't feeling our best and when the nerves get the best of us. I did do another episode on this topic about 1.5 years ago called Tips to Perform with Confidence. So you might want to go back and listen to that one as well. And I'm sure I'll probably repeat some of the things I said there because they're still true. But hopefully I can add some more useful information for you today beyond what I shared back then. My first tip here might seem obvious, but as pianists, sometimes we forget to breathe. Unlike musicians who sing or play wind instruments, we don't need to breathe in order to play our instrument, to make sound come out of it. So I myself often find myself holding my breath because somehow it feels safer than breathing. So the first thing I want you to do when you feel nervous, or to remind your students to do, is to breathe. Even one slow breath will often help calm your nerves. And I should mention that doing some breathing exercises before you go on stage can be really helpful as well. You might want to try closing your eyes, taking some nice, slow breaths while you visualize a beautiful musical performance of the music. Along with breathing, make sure that you aren't doing what I find myself often doing, which is holding my jaw tight and pinching up my shoulders. Why is it so hard to just relax? All of my tension seems to live in my jaw and my shoulders, so I have to consciously make an effort to relax those parts of my body. The next thing I want to encourage you to do when you are performing is to have something to focus on that is not your nerves. And what better thing to focus on than playing beautiful musical phrases? You can even plan this out ahead of time. Maybe you make up a story that goes along with each phrase, or you have a picture in your mind that helps you play musically. Or it might be something more concrete, like trying to make each note sound different from the last. I believe that this is the discipline of performing, training our brains to think about things that will actually help us perform better rather than scurrying down the rabbit hole of negative thoughts and nervous energy. Today, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about preparation, even though I believe preparation is one of the most crucial parts of combating performance anxiety. I think we all know that the more well-prepared you are, the better you will perform and the less nervous you will be. But I do have a couple of pro tips, I guess you could call them, about preparation. The first is, if possible, practice or rehearse in the performance space ahead of time. There are all sorts of logistical reasons why this is a good idea. You want to be able to try out the piano and see what the acoustics are like. If you're playing with another musician, see what the balance is going to be like. But it is also really helpful for your mental preparation. For me, there is something about being in the space that gets me ready for when there's going to be an audience in there listening. I remember when I was in college, I had my recitals in this huge auditorium with a balcony. And I would go in the evenings to practice before my recitals. And usually the stage lights were on, but the rest of the auditorium was pretty dark. So I never knew if someone might be up in the balcony listening. And that was just what I needed to make me a little bit nervous and feel some of those feelings that I would feel when I walked out for the actual recital. I also remember walking out on stage for the recital and thinking, okay, I've performed this recital multiple times in this space on this piano. I've been here before and I did it, so I can do it again. And if the space isn't available to you ahead of time, make sure that you have some kind of mock performance before the real thing. You can play for family or friends or your dog, or if you don't have a living creature, record yourself on your phone. You could go live on Instagram. How scary would that be? I don't know if I'd even be brave enough to do that, but hey, it would be great practice for performing. So let me know if you do it. All right, I want to give a few tips for helping your students with their performance nerves. I've noticed that some kids just naturally want to perform and don't even really seem that nervous, but of course there are others who are just terrified. I try to be careful how I talk about performing because I want to acknowledge that the nerves are normal, but I don't want to make the ones that aren't that nervous feel like performing should be a scary thing. So I usually at the beginning of our recitals acknowledge that the butterflies in their tummies are normal, but remind them that they are there to share their music with the audience and that everyone is cheering for them. For my own students, I make sure that they have a lot of run-throughs that feel like the recital ahead of time. I'll sort of set the stage for them mentally to imagine it's the day of the recital and it's their turn to play, and then have them go through that exercise of practicing performing. My next tip that you can share with your students or use for yourself in your own performances is about tempo. I remember my piano teacher telling me to always start a little slower than what I thought felt right in the moment on stage. How many times have you gotten nervous and started too fast and then gotten to the difficult passage and panicked because you realized that you started too fast? And that's a bad cycle to be in. I don't know about you, but my internal metronome speeds up when I get nervous. So I almost always make a point of starting slower than what feels right. You probably already do this, but it's worth reminding our students to think the tempo of the fast, tricky passage before they start, not just the tempo at the beginning of the piece. Most pieces don't jump right into with the 16th notes in measure 1. So you have to mentally skip ahead and get the tempo you want from the hardest section of the piece, and then go back and start a few clicks slower than that. Another thing that I do all the time, probably more than I should, is use rubato to my advantage. So if I'm coming to a big jump in the melody and I suddenly freak out that I'm going to miss the high note, I just slow down and make it musically seem like I'm supposed to be slowing down to make it dramatic, and then I don't miss the leap. I think with our students, it's also really important to normalize mistakes and make sure students know that a wrong note, or with singers if they forget a word, even a bunch of wrong notes doesn't negate the whole performance. I think I shared this story before, but at one of our recitals last year, I was accompanying a student and I was playing from my iPad, which honestly, I still kind of prefer the paper music, but sometimes the iPad is more convenient. So I was using the iPad and I missed a page turn. And so I was whacking away at the iPad trying to turn the page while missing a whole bunch of notes. And afterwards, my piano student came up to me and I could tell by her face that she wasn't super pleased with her performance. And I said to her, "Did you see me miss a whole bunch of notes up there when I was playing?" And she kind of smiled and nodded. And then we were able to talk about how it happens to everyone. And it's okay. You can still play beautiful music, even if it isn't a perfect performance. Of course, I don't want to make a bunch of mistakes on stage, but if it happens and it shows my students that we are all human and even professionals make mistakes, then I'm willing to sacrifice a perfect performance for that. This brings me to my final point that I want to make, and that is it's really important for our students to see us playing the piano and performing on stage. I think I just saw some of you cringe. I know that there are piano teachers out there who love performing and probably perform at every recital right alongside their students. But I dare say there are probably others who can't remember the last time they performed and highly prefer having their students perform rather than performing themselves. I'm going to give you a little nudge to challenge yourself to do some kind of performance. It doesn't have to be some crazy new Chopin piece that you've never played before. It might be playing a simple duet with your student or with another piano teacher. Or maybe performing a piece from the standard repertoire that isn't too difficult so that your students can hear it done well. Here's another idea for you. If you want to perform but are a little nervous, find a retirement home in your community that has a piano and go and play for the residents. They are 100% the most kind and complimentary audience you will ever find. It will give you such an ego boost and it will lift their spirits as well to hear some beautiful music. All right. That is all I have for you today, but I hope that this episode gave you some food for thought about performing and our thoughts around performing. I would love to hear from you. You can DM me on Instagram at Rachel Ehring and tell me what your next performance is and how you're feeling about it. That's all for this week. Thank you so much for being here and for listening. I'm Rachel Ehring, and you've been listening to the Top Music Piano Podcast. I'll see you back here next week.
How do you keep up to date with all the latest trends and research into music education? How do you connect with other teachers around the world and make sure your teaching stays fresh and relevant for students of all ages and stages both now and into the future? I created our Top Music Pro membership to be the one-stop shop for music teaching resources, training, support and community, and I'd love for you to come and join us inside. With over 40 comprehensive training courses, hundreds of teaching demonstrations and lesson plans, free monthly sheet music, discounts, and all the business and pedagogy support you could ever need, Top Music Pro is the community you've been looking for. If you're ready to level up your learning from the podcast and join thousands of other teachers in our global network, head over to topmusicpro.com today.